My teacup had long since gone cold, a skin forming over its milky surface, mirroring the way my own life felt these days, stagnant, forgotten. I sat in the stiff armchair of the small, furnished apartment my friend Beatrice had insisted I take, a temporary refuge that was starting to feel distressingly permanent. Outside, the November rain wept against the window pane, a miserable percussion accompanying the funereal dirge in my heart. It had been 3 months since I had last spoken to my daughter, Clara. 3 months since she, flush with the intoxicating power of a $50 million lottery win, had looked at me, her own mother, and seen nothing more than a piece of old furniture that no longer matched the new decor of her life. People fantasize about what they would do if they won the lottery. They dream of houses, cars, of quitting the jobs they hate. I don't think anyone dreams of how it might give them permission to discard the people they are supposed to love. I certainly never did. In my hand, I clutched a small, worn silver locket. It wasn't expensive, but it was freighted with history. I had given it to Clara on her 16th birthday. Inside, a microscopic picture of me and her late father, smiling on our wedding day. She had left it behind in the guest room of her old house, the one I had helped her and her husband, Mark, buy. It was discarded on the nightstand along with some cheap magazines and an empty water glass, a casualty of her hurried, gleeful exodus into a new, glittering life. Finding it was like finding a piece of my own shrapnel, a reminder of the wound I was still pretending wasn't there. She had won $50 million, a sum so vast it was almost comical, but she never knew the truth. She never knew that the modest, quiet life I lived was a choice, not a necessity. She never knew that the woman she had deemed a burden, a relic of a past she was eager to erase, was the silent, majority owner of a company far more valuable and influential than her fleeting lottery prize. She saw me as the widow of a humble accountant, a woman who had run a small, local textile business before retiring on a meager pension. She had no idea. She had no idea that when I sold that business, I had been cleverer than anyone, including her, had ever given me credit for. And as I sat there in that sterile apartment, the cold locket pressing into my palm, I realized my quiet, simple life was over. Her cruelty had shaken me from a long, peaceful slumber, and the woman who was waking up was not the gentle, accommodating mother she had so carelessly cast aside. The woman who was waking up remembered exactly who she was and what she had built. And she was about to remind her daughter of that fact in no uncertain terms. My story with Clara didn't begin with betrayal, of course. It began with love, a fierce and boundless love that took root the moment I first held her. Her father, my sweet David, passed away from a sudden heart attack when Clara was only 12. The world collapsed into a sinkhole of grief and fear, and in the center of that void were the two of us, clinging to each other. David had been a wonderful man, a meticulous accountant, but we were never wealthy. His passing left me with a mortgaged house, a preteen daughter, and a mountain of uncertainty. It was then that I discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. I had always been good with my hands, a skill passed down from my own mother. I could sew, I could quilt, I could weave. What started as a hobby, making blankets and clothes for friends to earn a little extra money, slowly, painstakingly, grew into something more. I called it Evelyn's Textiles. It was a foolishly simple name, but it was honest. I started in our garage, the rhythmic clatter of my sewing machine and the gentle hum of the loom becoming the soundtrack to Clara's teenage years. I poured every ounce of my energy, my grief, and my hope into that work. I wanted to give her everything David would have wanted for her. I wanted her to have stability, opportunity, a life unburdened by the financial anxieties that kept me awake at night. I remember the long nights, my fingers raw and my back aching, working to finish a large order for a local furniture store. Clara would come into the garage, bringing me a cup of tea, and sit with me, doing her homework under the harsh fluorescent light. She would talk about her day, her friends, her dreams of being a designer. In those moments, I felt a profound sense of purpose. Every stitch, every yard of fabric, was for her. It was all for her. My little garage business grew. My reputation for quality and unique design spread. Local boutiques started carrying my fabrics. Then regional ones. I was good at it, not just the creative side, but the business side, a skill I think I inherited from my own pragmatic father. I learned to negotiate, to manage inventory, to read a balance sheet. I hired my first employee, then 2 more. We moved out of the garage and into a small workshop. By the time Clara was heading off to college, a good one, the one she dreamed of, Evelyn's Textiles was a proper company, respected in the industry for its artisanal quality in an age of mass production. I paid for her tuition without her ever having to take out a loan. I made sure her dorm room was beautiful, filled with custom-made bedding and curtains from my finest fabrics. When she brought friends home, they would marvel at our house, which I had slowly renovated and filled with warmth and comfort. I was so proud. Proud of the business I had built from nothing, but infinitely more proud of the bright, ambitious young woman she was becoming. Or so I thought. She met Mark in her final year of college. He was handsome, charming, with an MBA and a fierce ambition that mirrored her own, though his felt sharper, colder. I tried to like him, for Clara's sake. I hosted them for dinners, listened to his endless talk about market shares and leveraged buyouts with a polite smile. But there was always something about him that put me on edge. He looked at our comfortable home, not with appreciation for the love that built it, but with an appraiser's eye, calculating its worth. He saw my business not as a life's work born from grief and grit, but as a cash cow, as he once so delicately put it. Clara, besotted, saw none of this. She saw a partner who understood her desire for more, who validated her belief that she was destined for a life grander than the one I had been able to provide. The wedding was beautiful, and I paid for most of it without a second thought. It's what a mother does. When they wanted to buy their first house a few years later, in a neighborhood they couldn't quite afford, I didn't hesitate. I gave them the down payment, a gift of nearly $100,000, a significant portion of my savings at the time. I told myself it was an investment in their happiness, in the future of my family. My granddaughter, Lily, was born 2 years later, and she became the new sun in my universe. She was a gentle, perceptive child, with my eyes and David's quiet smile. I threw myself into the role of grandmother, spending a few days a week at their house, watching Lily so Clara could focus on her budding career as a freelance graphic designer. I cooked, I cleaned, I gardened. I poured my love into their home, just as I had poured it into my own. I was happy. Truly. My life was simple, revolving around my granddaughter and the steady, quiet hum of my business. It was enough. Then, a few years ago, as I approached my late 60s, I decided it was time to slow down. The business had become a national brand. Evelyn's Textiles was now Evelyn's Atelier, a name Mark had suggested, and one of the few contributions of his I actually appreciated. It was a multi-million-dollar enterprise. The offers to buy me out had been coming for years. I was tired. The fire that had driven me for so long had softened to a gentle ember. I wanted more time for Lily, for my garden, for myself. So, I decided to sell. The news was met with celebration from Clara and Mark. They saw it as my final, triumphant act, the culmination of my work that would now allow me to relax and enjoy my golden years, as Mark so patronizingly phrased it. They threw me a lavish retirement party. They toasted my success. And they waited, with barely concealed anticipation, to see how my newfound liquidity would benefit them. But I had a secret. I didn't entirely sell. I am, if nothing else, a cautious woman. I saw the way Mark's eyes lit up when discussing my company's valuation. I saw the subtle, creeping entitlement in my own daughter. I loved her, but I was not a fool. I engaged the best corporate lawyer in the state, a shrewd, old-school gentleman named Arthur Vance, and we structured a deal of beautiful complexity. On paper, I sold Evelyn's atelier to a large investment firm. I stepped down as CEO, handing the reins to a brilliant young man I had personally mentored. A press release went out. I received a substantial, publicly known sum of money, which I used to set up various trusts and savings, including a generous one for Clara, and an even more generous one for Lily's education. Clara and Mark were thrilled. They assumed that was the end of the story. They thought my fortune was now a fixed, finite number. The truth, known only to me, my lawyer Arthur, and the new CEO, was that I had only sold 49% of the company. The other 51%, the controlling interest, was transferred quietly into a privately held trust, managed by Arthur's firm, with me as the sole, anonymous beneficiary. I retained ultimate control. I gave up the daily grind, the stress of management, but I never, for 1 second, gave up my life's work. I was the ghost in the machine, the silent, watchful owner. My retirement was a performance, a way to step back from the spotlight and live the quiet life I craved, while knowing my legacy was secure and still, fundamentally, mine. Clara and Mark knew none of this. They saw me as a comfortably retired old woman with a nice nest egg, a nest egg they viewed as a family resource. They believed my power, my influence, my wealth, had been capped. They had no idea that my real power had simply become invisible. And that was a mistake that would eventually cost them everything. My life after retirement settled into a pleasant, predictable rhythm. I had a generous pension from the sale, more than enough to live on comfortably, and Clara and Mark assumed that was the extent of my income. I never corrected them. There was no need. My joy came not from my hidden wealth, but from the freedom my new life afforded me. I spent 3, sometimes 4 days a week at their house, which was just a 15-minute drive from my own. I was the default babysitter, cook, and household manager. I'd arrive in the morning before Clara and Mark left for their busy, important jobs, get Lily ready for school, and spend the day tending to their home. I did their grocery shopping, made sure the laundry was done, and always had a hot meal waiting for them when they returned, exhausted and stressed. I did it gladly. Seeing Lily's face light up when I picked her up from school was my payment. Hearing her chatter about her day, her friends, her little triumphs and tribulations, was the dividend on my investment of time and love. The arrangement suited Clara and Mark perfectly. It saved them a fortune in childcare and domestic help, and it gave them the freedom to pursue their careers and their increasingly active social lives. "Mom, you're a lifesaver," Clara would say, kissing my cheek distractedly as she rushed out the door. "We literally couldn't do this without you." The words were a balm to my soul, a validation that I was needed, that I was still the vital, supporting pillar of my family. I did have my own life, of course. I had my friends, my garden, my book club. My closest friend, Beatrice, a sharp-witted widow I'd known for 40 years, would often raise an eyebrow. "Evelyn, they are taking advantage of you," she'd say over our weekly coffee. "You've raised your child. It's not your job to raise their house," I would always wave her concerns away. "It's not a job, BEA, I'd reply. "It's family. And I love it, and I did." Or perhaps, more accurately, I loved the feeling of being indispensable. I had built my identity around being a provider, a caregiver. First for Clara after David died, and now for her family. To be needed was to be loved, or so I believed. My own home, the one David and I had shared, felt too big and quiet without the hum of family life. It was a place I slept, but Clara's house was where I lived. Looking back, I can see the subtle shifts, the tiny cracks that were forming in the foundation of our relationship long before the lottery win. There were the little comments from Mark about my quaint taste in furniture. There was the time Clara forgot to invite me to a dinner party with their new, sophisticated friends until the last minute, explaining that she didn't think it would be my scene. There was the increasing frequency of them asking for financial help, despite their six-figure joint income. A new car, a lavish vacation, a country club membership. I always said yes. I dipped into the funds from my sale, telling them it was no problem, that the money was just sitting there anyway. Each transaction was a small, silent reassurance to myself that I was still important, still valued. They were grateful, in their own way. A thank you card, a nice bottle of wine. But the gratitude felt thin, transactional. It was the gratitude one shows to a bank for approving a loan, not to a mother for her boundless generosity. The real poison, however, began to seep in on a dreary Tuesday afternoon. Clara called me, her voice trembling with a strange, high-pitched energy I'd never heard before. "Mom? Are you sitting down?" "You need to sit down." My heart leaped into my throat. "What is it? Is it Lily? Is everyone okay?" "Everyone's fine, Mom. Everyone is more than fine." And then she told me. Mark had been part of an office lottery pool for years, a weekly $2 habit he always complained about. That week, their numbers had come up. The jackpot was $100 million, split between two winning tickets. Their share was $50 million. $50 million. The number was obscene, unreal. I felt a dizzying rush of joy for them. All their worries, all their striving and stressing about money, it was all over. "Clara, that's incredible!" I exclaimed, my own voice shaking. "I'm so happy for you." "I know. I can't even process it. 50 million. Can you believe it?" she squealed. In that moment, a small, selfish thought flickered through my mind: now they won't need my money anymore. I felt a pang of something I couldn't name, a tiny premonition of being rendered obsolete. I pushed it down immediately, ashamed of myself. This was the best thing that could have ever happened to them. In the background, I could hear Mark shouting with glee. "We are rich, baby. We are finally rich." Then Clara said the words that I would cling to for weeks, like a castaway clinging to a piece of driftwood. "Nothing's going to change, Mom. I promise. We are still a family. This just makes things easier for all of us." I believed her. I wanted to believe her with every fiber of my being. I had no idea that "easier for all of us" was code for "easier to get rid of you." I had no concept that this sudden, unearned fortune wouldn't just change their lives. It would fundamentally change who they were, revealing a core of selfishness and cruelty I never could have imagined existed within my own child. The lottery win wasn't just a windfall, it was a catalyst, an accelerant that would burn away the last vestiges of our family's fragile connection, leaving nothing but the cold, hard ash of betrayal. The change wasn't instantaneous. It was a slow fade, like a photograph left in the sun. For the first few weeks, everything was a chaotic whirlwind of excitement. Lawyers and financial advisors, whom Mark selected with an air of newfound expertise, were suddenly in constant rotation through their house. The conversations, once about school plays and what to have for dinner, were now peppered with terms like tax implications, investment portfolios, and trust structures. I continued my routine, a quiet anchor in their storm of fortune. I'd make coffee for the stern-looking men in suits, keep Lily occupied while Clara and Mark were locked in important meetings, and ensure the rhythm of domestic life carried on. Clara, in these early days, was still my daughter. She would collapse onto the kitchen stool at the end of the day, head in her hands, and say, "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom. You're the only normal thing in this whole circus." Her words were a lifeline. I was still needed. My role was secure. But the ground was shifting beneath my feet. The first tremor came when they announced they were selling the house. "It's a great house, Mom," Clara explained, avoiding my eyes. "But it's just not a $50 million house, you know." Mark chimed in, puffing out his chest. We are looking at properties in Northgate Estates. It's time we lived in a home that reflects our new status. Northgate Estates. It was a gated community on the other side of the county, infamous for its sprawling, ostentatious mansions, and its even more ostentatious residents. It was an hour's drive away, through choking traffic. That's a long way, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. What about Lily's school? Her friends? We'll hire a driver if we have to, Mark said dismissively. The schools in Northgate are the best in the state. This is about giving Lily the best possible future. The irony of that statement was lost on him. He was talking about a future where Lily would be stripped of her community, her friends, and her doting grandmother, all in the name of the best. I tried to express my concerns to Clara in private. Honey, it's so far away. I won't be able to come over every day. It'll be a whole production just to see Lily. She patted my hand, a gesture that was meant to be reassuring, but felt deeply condescending. Mom, don't worry. You can come visit whenever you want. And besides, she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, you won't have to work so hard anymore. We'll hire a housekeeper, a nanny, all of that. You can finally just relax and be a grandma. She thought she was offering me a gift, a promotion from unpaid servant to cherished guest. She didn't understand that the work was my purpose. The daily rhythm of caring for them was the entire structure of my life. To take that away was not to free me, but to erase me. The house hunt became their obsession. They no longer had time for family dinners. My carefully prepared meals sat in the fridge, untouched, as they rushed off to meet with an elite real estate agent. The talk was all about square footage, home theaters, and wine cellars. They spoke of their old life, the life I had helped them build, with a kind of disdain, as if it were a shabby coat they couldn't wait to shed. The day they bought the new house, they called me, giddy with excitement. It was a 10,000 square foot monstrosity of glass and white marble, a place so cold and impersonal it looked more like a corporate headquarters than a home. It has a guest wing, Mom. Clara trilled. A whole separate wing. You'll have your own suite, when you come to stay, a guest wing. Not a grandmother's room. A place for a visitor, transient and temporary. Lily was the only one who seemed to share my apprehension. I don't want to move, Grandma, she whispered to me one afternoon as we worked in the garden, her small hands carefully tending to the roses I had planted years ago. I'll miss my school. And I'll miss you. I hugged her tightly, my heart aching. I'll miss you too, sweet pea. More than you know. But I'll come visit, I promise. But even as I said the words, they felt hollow. Visiting Northgate Estates would require a formal invitation, a coordinated effort. It wouldn't be the comfortable, spontaneous life we had. It would be an event. I would become an appointment in their busy new schedule. The slights, once small and infrequent, began to accumulate. They hired an interior designer, a chic, severe woman who dismissed every piece of furniture in their old house as hopelessly dated, that included the beautiful oak dining table I had bought them as a wedding gift. It was relegated to the garage, destined for donation. My opinion on the new decor was never sought. When I tried to offer a suggestion, Clara would give me a tight, pitying smile. That's a nice idea, Mom, but I think we'll leave it to the professionals. Tastes have changed. The implication was clear. My taste, my style, my entire way of being, was obsolete. I was a relic from a past they were systematically dismantling and discarding, piece by piece. The final, most telling sign was the change in their language. They stopped saying, "Thank you, my constant presence, my help, my love." It was no longer a gift to be appreciated, but an expectation that was becoming an inconvenience. I was the old world, and they were rocketing toward a new one, and it was becoming painfully obvious there was no room for me on the flight. The day of the move was a blur of organized chaos. A fleet of professional movers, dispatched by Mark, swarmed the house, packing boxes with an impersonal efficiency that felt brutal. Clara and Mark directed the proceedings like generals, pointing and commanding, their faces flush with the thrill of their ascent. I was relegated to the sidelines, trying to keep Lily, who was visibly upset, out of the way. I had baked cookies and made lemonade, a habit from a lifetime of such occasions, but the movers had their own catered lunch, and Clara and Mark were too busy to eat. The plates of cookies sat on the counter, a pathetic offering from a world that no longer existed. Late in the afternoon, after the last of the trucks had pulled away, leaving the house echoing and empty, I walked through the rooms for the last time. Ghostly outlines remained on the walls where pictures had hung, pictures of Lily's first day of school, of family vacations I had paid for, of me and Clara laughing. It was like a crime scene, all the evidence of a life hastily scrubbed away. It was then that I went into the guest room, my room, to gather my small bag of things I kept there. And on the nightstand, next to a discarded celebrity magazine, lay the small silver locket. Forgotten. Unimportant. A piece of sentimental junk not worth packing. I picked it up, its familiar weight a shock of cold metal against my skin. At that moment, I knew. It wasn't just a locket they had left behind. It was me. That small, forgotten object was a symbol of their new philosophy, anything that couldn't be quantified in dollars, anything that was valued only for its history, or its love, had no place in their $50 million future. I slipped it into my pocket, the sharp edges digging into my palm, and walked out of the empty house without looking back. A week later, Clara called. Her voice had the bright, artificial tone she now used for obligatory phone calls. Mom? We are finally in. You have to come see the house. We are having a small housewarming thing on Saturday. Just a few people, I would later learn, meant half of Northgate Estates and a handful of local celebrities Mark was desperate to impress. I agreed to go, of course. A part of me, a foolish, hopeful part, still believed that seeing me there, in their new space, would remind them of who I was, of the bond we shared. I spent Saturday morning baking my signature lemon cake, the one Clara had always claimed was her favorite. I wrapped it carefully and chose my outfit with more care than usual, wanting to look nice, to fit in, to not be an embarrassment. The drive to Northgate was as dreadful as I'd imagined. After navigating a labyrinth of identical, manicured streets, I arrived at a gatehouse, where a stern guard checked my name off a list as if I were a delivery person. The house, when I finally reached it, was even more overwhelming in person. It wasn't a home, it was a statement. A vast, white palace that loomed over its perfectly landscaped grounds with an air of sterile arrogance. I parked my modest sedan between a Maserati and a Bentley, feeling like a sparrow that had landed among peacocks. I walked up the sweeping marble steps, holding my lemon cake, and rang the bell. The door was opened by a uniformed maid, who took the cake from me with a confused expression, as if no one had ever brought a homemade item to this house before. Clara greeted me with a quick, air kiss near my cheek. She was wearing a silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to, her hair and makeup professionally done. Mom, you made it. Isn't this place just incredible? She gestured vaguely at the cavernous white foyer, which was already filling with loud, expensively dressed strangers. She didn't introduce me to anyone. She simply pointed me in the direction of the living room, a vast space with ceilings so high my voice felt lost in it, and said, "Go mingle." Mark's around here somewhere. I wandered through the crowd, feeling utterly invisible. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, and the sound of braying laughter. People looked through me, their eyes scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. Mark eventually found me, clapping me on the shoulder with a booming, false heartiness. "Evelyn. Welcome to the new digs. What do you think?" Before I could answer, he was distracted by a man he introduced as the best wealth manager on the East Coast, and disappeared into a conversation about offshore accounts. The only island of warmth in that cold, cavernous space was Lily. She found me standing awkwardly by a floor-to-ceiling window, and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Grandma, you came of course, sweet pea. I wouldn't miss it, I don't like it here," she whispered. "It's too big. And I don't know anyone." "I know, honey," I soothed, stroking her hair. "It just takes some getting used to," but I knew she was right. It wasn't a home. It was a venue. I stayed for another hour, making a Herculean effort. I tried to engage in conversation, but my stories about gardening and my book club fell flat among people discussing their trips to Monaco and their new Teslas. I saw my lemon cake, uncut, sitting on a side table amidst an elaborate catered spread of sushi and champagne. It looked as out of place as I felt. The last straw, the one that finally broke the back of my denial, came near the end of the evening. I found Clara in the kitchen, a gleaming, stainless steel laboratory that looked as if it had never seen a pot or pan. She was talking to Mark, their backs to me. I was about to announce I was leaving when I heard my name. "So what are we going to do about my mother?" Clara asked, her voice tight with irritation. "She just doesn't fit, Mark. Look at her. She's been wandering around like a lost puppy all night." "It's embarrassing," Mark sighed, the sound loud and put upon. "I know. But what can we do? She's your mother, we can't have her just showing up whenever she wants," Clara continued, her voice turning sharp and cruel. "It lowers the tone. And now that we are planning the world tour, we need to be clear. We can't be worrying about her while we are in Bali, a world tour." This was the first I was hearing of it. "She has her own money," Mark said. "She'll be fine. She should probably look into some of those nice retirement communities. Get a place with people her own age. It would be for the best." "I'll have to talk to her," Clara said, her voice filled with a weary resignation, as if discussing an unpleasant chore, like firing a gardener. "I just need to find the right time to tell her that she needs to start being more independent. She can't lean on us forever." I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart turning to a block of ice in my chest. Lean on them? I, who had been the pillar they had leaned on their entire adult lives. I, who had funded their home, their lifestyle, their comfort, for years. I, who had given my time, my love, my energy, without ever asking for anything in return. Embarrassing. Lowers the tone. A problem to be managed. The words were like physical blows. In that instant, all the love and warmth I felt for my daughter curdled into something cold and bitter. The woman standing there, my child, was a stranger to me. A monster of ingratitude and avarice, sculpted by $50 million. I didn't say anything. I didn't announce my departure. I simply turned and walked away. I let myself out the enormous front door, past the luxury cars and the laughing guests. As I drove away from that soulless palace, the rain began to fall again, but this time, I wasn't crying. My eyes were dry. My hands were steady on the wheel. The grief that had been a dull ache for months had finally, mercifully, cauterized, leaving behind a hard, clean scar of pure, unadulterated resolve. They thought I was a lost puppy. They were about to find out I was a wolf who had merely been sleeping. I didn't go home. I couldn't bear the thought of my empty house, filled with memories that now felt like lies. I drove straight to Beatrice's small, cozy condominium. She opened the door in her dressing gown, her face etched with concern when she saw me. "Evelyn? What on earth is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse, Bea," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I've seen my daughter." I collapsed onto her sofa, and for the first time, I told her everything. Not just about the party, but about the weeks of slights, the condescension, the slow, painful erasure of my place in their lives. I told her about the locket. I told her the words I had overheard in the kitchen. I laid it all bare, and when I was finished, the silence in the room was heavy. Beatrice, who had never minced words in her life, simply came over, sat beside me, and took my hand. "That ungrateful, selfish, little," she began, her voice shaking with rage on my behalf. "I'm so sorry, Evie. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry," I said, and the voice that came out of me sounded unfamiliar, steely. "Be angry. I am 4 years, I had been Evelyn, the gentle mother, the doting grandmother. A soft place to land. That woman had died tonight in a cold, marble kitchen in Northgate Estates. In her place was someone else, someone I hadn't been in a very long time, Evelyn Thorne, the woman who built a national company from her garage with nothing but grit and a broken heart. The woman who negotiated with sharks and won. The woman who was nobody's fool. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Clara. She answered with a groggy, hungover voice. "Mom? It's early, I'm not coming over anymore, Clara," I said. There was no preamble, no emotion. Just a statement of fact. There was a pause. "What? What are you talking about?" My presence, as you so eloquently put it, lowers the tone. "I've decided to stop embarrassing you." The silence on the other end of the line was thick with shock. I had caught her off guard. She hadn't had time to prepare her carefully rehearsed speech about my independence. "Mom, you must have misheard. I didn't mean it like that." "Oh, I think you meant it exactly like that," I replied, my voice as cold as the locket I was still clutching in my pocket. "You and Mark have a new life. Go live it. But I will no longer be a part of it. I won't be your unpaid nanny, your cook, your maid, or your emotional support system. And I certainly won't be your bank." "We're done." "You can't be serious," she gasped, a note of panic creeping into her voice. The reality of losing her safety net was beginning to dawn on her. "What about Lily? You should have thought about Lily before you decided your mother was a piece of disposable trash," I said. "You can tell her whatever you like." "Goodbye, Clara." I hung up before she could reply, my hand trembling slightly, not from weakness, but from the adrenaline of drawing a line in the sand that was centuries overdue. The second call was to my lawyer, Arthur Vance. "Arthur," I said, my voice now calm and steady. "It's Evelyn Thorne. I need to see you. It's time to come out of retirement." There was a brief, knowing silence on the other end of the line. "I've been wondering when you'd call," he said. "My boardroom. Tomorrow at 9 that evening." Beatrice and I sat, with a bottle of her best red wine. I felt lighter than I had in years. The decision, once made, was liberating. I had spent so long trying to hold onto a relationship that was already gone, trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. Now, I had let it go. I had let it sink. "So what are you going to do?" Bea asked, her eyes sharp and curious. "They think my only power was the money I gave them," I said, swirling the wine in my glass, watching the deep red liquid cling to the sides. "They think my worth is a number in a bank account that they've already drained a good portion of. They have no idea about the company." A slow smile spread across my face, the first genuine smile in months. It felt foreign and powerful. "Clara and Mark are obsessed with status. With luxury brands. With being seen as people of taste and influence. They want to be on the inside of the exclusive world they think their money has bought them access to, and—" Beatrice prompted, leaning forward. "And," I continued, "I happen to own one of the most respected and exclusive textile and design houses in the country. A company whose products are sought after by the very designers and tastemakers they are so desperate to impress. They want to play in the big leagues. It's time someone reminded them that I don't just play in the league. I own the stadium." My meeting with Arthur Vance was like stepping back into a former life. The mahogany-paneled boardroom, the scent of old leather and fresh coffee, the deference of the staff, it all felt comfortingly familiar. With me was Julian Croft, the bright young CEO I had personally appointed. He was a good man, fiercely loyal and brilliant at his job. He knew my role as the silent owner, and had respected my privacy impeccably over the years. "Evelyn," he said, his face breaking into a warm smile as I entered. "It's good to see you here. I'm sorry about the circumstances." Arthur had briefed him on the situation. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet redness. "Thank you for coming, Julian," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "My seat. Let's get to work." For the next 2 hours, we dove into the company's performance. Julian walked me through the last few years of growth, the new acquisitions, the strategic plans for the future. It was exhilarating. I had kept up with the monthly reports Arthur sent me, of course, but this was different. This was feeling the engine of my creation thrumming beneath my hands again. I was sharp, focused. My questions were incisive, my suggestions well received. The part of my brain that had been dormant, the part that knew how to build, to strategize, to lead, sparked back to life. I felt powerful. I felt like myself. Then, we came to the most interesting part of the agenda. "There's a new acquisition we are finalizing," Julian said, pushing a file across the table. "A small, but incredibly prestigious Italian leather goods company called Bellucci. Their craftsmanship is unparalleled. It would be a huge asset for our new luxury home furnishings line." I opened the file. The Bellucci brand was a darling of the design world, known for its buttery soft leathers and exclusive, bespoke furniture. It was exactly the kind of brand that people like Clara and Mark would fawn over, a symbol of insider status. "And," Julian continued, a glint in his eye, "we've been in negotiations with the top interior designer on the East Coast, a woman named Francesca De Luca. She wants an exclusive contract to use Bellucci products and our premier fabrics for her clients. She believes, and I agree, that the partnership would elevate both our brands to an entirely new level." Francesca De Luca. The name was vaguely familiar. I racked my brain, and then it hit me. She was the severe, chic woman Clara and Mark had hired. The one who had dismissed my wedding gift as dated and my taste as quaint. The world, it seemed, was smaller and more deliciously ironic than I could have ever hoped. "Francesca De Luca," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "I'm familiar with her work. And with some of her current clients." Julian and Arthur exchanged a look. They were beginning to see where this was going. "Is there a problem?" Julian asked carefully. "Not a problem," I said, my smile widening. "An opportunity. Arthur, I want you to draw up the acquisition papers for Bellucci. Expedite them. I want that company fully under our control by the end of the week. And Julian, I want you to stall the contract with Ms. De Luca. Tell her there's been a change in ownership, that all new major partnerships are on hold pending a strategic review by the new board." "The new board?" Julian asked, confused. "Yes," I said, placing my hands flat on the polished mahogany table. "Me? I'm reactivating my position as chairman of the board." Effective immediately, the plan began to form in my mind, elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its potential impact. Clara and Mark were building their entire new identity around this mansion, this symbol of their wealth. And that mansion's soul, its claim to true luxury, was in the hands of Francesca De Luca. And Francesca De Luca's ability to deliver was about to be in my hands. Furthermore, I continued, my voice steady and clear, I want to restructure my will. Everything, the full 51% controlling interest in this company and all my personal assets, is to be placed in a trust for my granddaughter, Lily. Clara is to be explicitly written out. The trust will be managed by an independent board, with Mr. Vance here serving as executor. Lily will not gain control of the principal until she is 30 years old, but the trust will provide for her education and well-being. My daughter and her husband are not to be named as guardians, or have any access to the funds, under any circumstances. Arthur nodded, already making notes. Consider it done, Evelyn. They wanted me to be independent, I said, more to myself than to them. They are about to find out what my independence truly looks like. I left the law office that day feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in decades. The grief for the daughter I had lost was still there, a hollow ache deep inside me. But it was now overlaid with a powerful sense of purpose. I wasn't just getting revenge. I was protecting my legacy. I was protecting my granddaughter. I was taking back the power that had always been mine, the power they had been too blind and too arrogant to ever see. They had kicked me out of their lives, believing I was nothing. They were about to learn that I was, and always had been, everything. The days that followed were a quiet hum of activity. I moved out of Beatrice's apartment, and into a beautiful condominium I bought with cash, in a lovely building downtown with a view of the park. It was smaller than my old house, but it was mine, filled with light and potential. I spent my days with Beatrice, rediscovering the simple joys of a life lived for myself. We went to museums, tried new restaurants, took long walks. For the first time in years, I wasn't on someone else's schedule. I wasn't waiting for a call or anticipating a need. I was simply living. Meanwhile, Arthur and Julian were executing my plan with military precision. The acquisition of Bellucci was completed in record time. Evelyn's atelier was now the sole owner of the coveted Italian brand. Just as I had predicted, panic began to ripple through the rarefied world of high-end design. The news of the stall on the De Luca contract sent shockwaves. Francesca De Luca, a woman used to getting exactly what she wanted, was furious and, more importantly, powerless. Her entire design for Clara and Mark's mansion, the showpiece she was counting on for a feature in Architectural Digest, was built around exclusive access to Bellucci leather and my company's premier fabrics. Without them, she had nothing. The first inkling I had that the trap had been sprung came from Lily. She called me one afternoon, her voice small and worried. She was calling from the iPad I had given her, a private line of communication I had insisted on. "Hi, Grandma. Hi, sweet pea. How are you?" "Okay," she said, though she sounded far from it. "Mommy is really mad. Her and Daddy are yelling a lot." "Oh. What about, honey?" "The new house. The lady who was decorating it, Francesca, she called and said she can't get any of the furniture or the fabrics we picked. She said the company that makes it got sold and they won't sell it to her." A smile touched my lips. "Is that so?" "Yeah. And Mommy is freaking out because we are having a big party in 3 weeks. A house reveal party, she calls it. And now all the rooms are empty. She said her reputation is ruined, her reputation. Not her home, not her family's comfort. Her reputation. It was all so predictable. For the next 2 weeks, I received regular updates from a miserable Lily. Clara and Mark were in a state of perpetual crisis. They were trying to pull strings, calling in favors, attempting to throw their newfound money at the problem. But they were coming up against a wall they didn't understand. The world of old money and established power doesn't respond to the demands of the nouveau riche. They were finding that their $50 million, while a vast sum, could not buy them entry into a club whose doors I had quietly locked from the inside. Finally, desperation led them to do exactly what I knew they would. Mark, using every ounce of his supposed business acumen, managed to secure a meeting. He sold it to the gatekeepers as a potential high-level investment discussion with the new ownership of Evelyn's atelier. He and Clara wanted to make a personal appeal, to try and leverage their wealth to get what they wanted. They were granted a meeting in the main boardroom. My boardroom. The day of the meeting, I dressed with purpose. I chose a simple but impeccably tailored navy blue suit from one of my own company's lines. I wore my hair in a neat chignon. I looked every bit the chairman of the board. I arrived at the office an hour early and sat alone at the head of the long, polished table, sipping my tea, feeling a profound and chilling calm. Julian and Arthur were in the adjoining office, ready to come in when I called them. This was a meeting I needed to handle myself. At precisely 10 o'clock, my assistant's voice came over the intercom. Mrs. Thorne. A Mr. and Mrs. Chamberlain are here to see you. Clara, and Mark still used Mark's last name, of course. Thorne was a name from the quaint past she had shed. Send them in, I said. The door opened. Clara and Mark strode in, their faces set with determined, rehearsed smiles. They were dressed in their power clothes, Mark in a slick suit, Clara in a designer dress. Their eyes scanned the room, looking for the new, powerful owner they had come to petition. They looked past me, assuming I was a secretary, or an assistant who had been told to wait. Then, Clara's eyes did a double-take. Her confident smile faltered, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, uncomprehending shock. Mark followed her gaze, and his face went pale. He looked at me, then at the head of the table where I sat, then back at me. The gears in his mind were grinding, trying to process a reality that simply did not compute. Mom? Clara whispered, the word barely audible. What? What are you doing here? I didn't smile. I simply looked at them, my gaze level and cold. I believe you have a meeting with the owner of this company, I said, my voice resonating with an authority they had never heard from me before. You found her. Please sit. They stood frozen for a moment, looking like two statues. Then, slowly, as if in a trance, they sank into the two chairs opposite me. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Clara stared at me, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. All the pieces were clicking into place for her, my retirement, my sudden coolness, the inexplicable wall they had hit. I don't understand, she stammered, looking from me to the expensive, art-filled room. This company. Evelyn's Atelier. You sold it. I sold 49% of it, I corrected her gently. A controlling interest is 51%. I retained that. I've always been the majority owner. I just let other people handle the day-to-day, while I was busy raising my granddaughter, and cleaning your house. The color drained completely from Clara's face. Mark looked like he was going to be physically ill. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, speechless for the first time in his life. You came here today to beg for access to exclusive products to furnish your big, empty mansion, I continued, my voice calm and even. You came here to impress a world that you foolishly believe you can buy your way into. The fabrics you want, the Bellucci leather you covet. They all belong to me. I let that sink in. I watched as the full scope of their miscalculation crashed down upon them. They hadn't just insulted a lonely old woman. They had crossed a formidable business power, who held the keys to the very kingdom they were trying to storm. You came into my life's work, I said, my voice dropping slightly, the company I built from nothing in my garage to give you a better life, and you intended to use it as a social climbing tool. The irony is breathtaking. Clara finally found her voice, a pathetic whimper. Mom, I didn't know. If I had known, if you had known I was powerful, you would have treated me better. I cut her off, my voice sharp as glass. That's the point, isn't it, Clara? Your respect, your love, it's all conditional. It's dependent on what a person can do for you. When you thought I was just your retired, slightly embarrassing mother with a modest pension, I was disposable. A problem to be managed. Someone who lowered the tone, but now that you see me sitting in this chair, suddenly you're sorry. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the bustling city below. Your request for an exception to the hold on new contracts is denied. Your designer, Ms. DeLuca, will have to source her materials elsewhere. I imagine your house reveal party will be a rather Spartan affair. I turned back to face them. Their faces were a mixture of terror, humiliation, and disbelief. But this is bigger than fabrics and furniture, I said. This is about consequences. 4 months, you have treated me with a cruelty and disrespect that I have never known. You took my love, my support, and my generosity, and you threw it away like garbage the second you got your hands on some money. I picked up a file from the table. It was a copy of my new will. This brings me to my final point. I have restructured my estate. My entire fortune, including my controlling interest in this company, will be placed into a trust for Lily. You, Clara, have been completely and irrevocably written out. You will not see another penny from me for the rest of your life. Not now, not when I'm gone. Clara let out a choked sob. Mark just stared, his arrogant facade completely shattered. You won your $50 million, I said, my voice softening for a fraction of a second, a flicker of the mother I used to be. I truly hope it brings you all the happiness you desire. You are free of me. Free of the burden of your old mother. Go and enjoy your new life. Our business here is concluded. I pressed the intercom button. Please show Mr. and Mrs. Chamberlain out. They stumbled out of the room like ghosts, their faces ashen. I watched them go, and for the first time, I felt no anger, no resentment. Just a vast, quiet emptiness where my love for my daughter used to be. And in its place, a sense of peace. The storm had passed. The final act of my old life was over, and the first day of my new one was just beginning. The aftermath was exactly as I had anticipated. Clara and Mark's party was, by all accounts, a spectacular failure. Without the bespoke furnishings and exclusive cachet of Francesca De Luca's design, the mansion was just a big, empty box. The guests, the fickle, status-seeking friends they had tried so hard to cultivate, saw the failure and smelled the blood in the water. The story of their humiliation, of being publicly put in their place by a mother they had scorned, spread through the Northgate rumor mill like wildfire. Their $50 million couldn't protect them from ridicule. Money can buy many things, but it cannot buy respect once it has been so thoroughly lost. Their relationship, built on a shallow foundation of greed and social ambition, began to crumble under the weight of their public failure and private resentment. Lily told me, in our quiet phone calls, that the yelling was constant now. They blamed each other, Clara for her foolish cruelty, Mark for his arrogant overreach. Their fortune, which was supposed to be their salvation, had become their prison, illuminating every flaw in their characters and their marriage. I felt a pang of sadness for them, but it was a distant, detached sadness, the kind one feels for strangers in a tragic story. They had made their choices. They had sown the wind, and now they were reaping the whirlwind. My life, in stark contrast, blossomed. Moving into my new condo was a rebirth. I filled it not with expensive things, but with things I loved, books, art from local painters, and a small loom in the corner of the guest room, where I began to weave again, not for business, but for the pure joy of it. I re-engaged with my company, not as a daily manager, but as an active and engaged chairman of the board. I found a renewed sense of purpose in mentoring Julian, in guiding the company's philanthropic efforts, and in ensuring the legacy I had built would stand for something more than just profit. My work with the company led me to a charity fundraiser, where I was seated next to a man named Robert. He was a widower, a retired history professor with a quick wit and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. We talked all night. We went out for dinner the next week, and then again the week after that. It was a gentle, unexpected joy, a companionship I had not realized how much I missed. But the true center of my new life was Lily. With the situation at her home becoming increasingly toxic, I worked with Arthur to make a formal arrangement. It was a testament to how broken things were that Clara and Mark agreed with very little fight. Lily now spends every weekend and most of the summer with me. Away from the tension of her parents' house, she has blossomed. We bake cookies, we work in the community garden, we visit museums. I tell her stories about her grandfather, David, and about how I started my company in a garage. I am giving her roots, a sense of a history that is built on love and hard work, not on a lottery ticket. I am showing her that a woman's worth is not in who she impresses or what she owns, but in what she creates and the kindness she shows to the world. A few months ago, I received a letter. It was from Clara. It was long, rambling, and filled with self-pity, apologies, and blame. She wrote about how sorry she was, how she missed me, how their life had become a nightmare. She asked if we could try again, if I could find it in my heart to forgive her. I read the letter, and I put it away in a drawer. Forgiveness is a complex thing. Perhaps one day, a part of me will be able to forgive the daughter she was. But I cannot forget what she became. I cannot know the coldness in her heart. To let her back into my life would be to disrespect the woman I have become, the peace I have fought so hard to find. My love for her has been transformed into a scar, a place that no longer hurts to the touch, but a permanent reminder of the wound. Sometimes, when the evening light fills my apartment, I sit by the window with Robert, a cup of tea in my hand, a hot one, this time. We'll watch the people walking in the park below, and I feel a profound sense of gratitude. I lost a daughter, yes. The pain of that loss will likely always be a quiet hum beneath the surface of my days. But in losing her, I found myself. I reclaimed my strength, my purpose, and my dignity. I built a new life, not on the ruins of the old one, but on a fresh, solid foundation of self-respect. I have love, I have friendship, I have my granddaughter's bright future to look forward to, and I have a peace that no amount of money could ever buy. And that, I have come to realize, is the greatest fortune of all.